Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're here today because Ford recently announced a recall impacting nearly 4.4 million vehicles across the US. Headlines like that immediately create pressure inside dealerships. Service lanes, BDC teams, and parts departments are all going to feel it. But recalls are more than just compliance events, as we know. They're customer re-engagement opportunities, and the gap between recall volume and recall conversion is significant across the industry. Today, we're going to talk about what strong recall execution actually looks like at both the store level and the strategic level, and how fixed ops leaders should be thinking about recalls moving forward. Before we dive in, let's go ahead and introduce the group. I'm Ethan Pikus, Director of Marketing here at Spiffy. I'm joined by my co-host, Addison Lessing. Addison, welcome.
Thanks, Ethan. I'm Madison, Director of Partner Success here at Spiffy. I work directly with dealers on implementation, strategy, performance, and executing out in the field.
We're also joined by an outstanding duo of leaders. First up, we've got Kyle Cloud, Fixed Operations Director at Athens Ford down in Athens, Georgia. Kyle's been leading recall execution at the store level and has some great data to share with us on some recent campaigns they've run over at Athens Ford. And then we have David Mondragon, CEO of Auto Trust Dealer Alliance, a dealer-owned cooperative that works to give franchise dealers the same leverage as the large public dealer groups have. David also held a number of senior roles at Ford, including as CEO of Ford Canada. David brings the OEM perspective and deep experience at the very highest levels of our industry. Thank you both for being here. Addison, go ahead and start at the dealership level with Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. So let's jump right in. When the headline is 4.4, million recalls, what's the first thing that you're thinking through, that first reaction operationally?
We're checking to make sure we're staffed correctly. We're looking at parts availability, reading, all the bulletins that are coming out, what needs to be done. And then we're planning with our BDC on how to execute that outbound call. With being on Spiffy, we can upload lists to Spiffy to get those customers contacted quickly. Based upon the 4 BDC agents I have to do that many outbound calls that we get for our list takes time. With Spiffy, we're able to upload a list and have it generated within a couple hours to get the outbound touch to the customer. And then the customer can jump on our scheduler and make an appointment for our mobile service, which is an easy breeze, especially without having to manually call each customer. And then the customers have to answer the phone. They have to go through, Rolodex. With online scheduler, they can just click the time, punch it in, and literally get on the schedule to get that vehicle fixed.
No, that's awesome. So this is a perfect segue. Then, I would ask historically, but before you had sort of the Spiffy system in place, before you had this structured system in place, how did those recalls look for you? How are you guys trying to execute those?
Oh man, you give a pretty call list, and literally you have an agent that is making 40, 50, 60, 70 calls a day, leaving voicemails. Customers are calling back in. We don't have anybody to answer the phone because it basically just streamlined the process. Obviously, everybody's having employer shortage where people don't show up for work. So literally having to give a list to a BDC agent to completely clear it in a day is godsend. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So with the program that you guys offer that we've been on, literally we can upload the list and every single customer on the list can be contacted within the matter of a couple hours.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you just touched on it. Where would you say, in that process, say pre-Spiffy, where would you say that biggest friction point was? Was it calling the customers or just trying to get them to call you back? Was it the staffing? I mean, where would you say was your biggest pain point?
Staffing to get all the customers called in a timely manner. Our biggest thing is customer safety, customer communication, making sure that we don't want the customers calling in saying, "Hey, why didn't you call me about a recall?" We're trying to reach them to let them know so they're completely aware of, a safety recall is, obviously the Department of Motor Transportation wants to get that handled. So they don't really want you to wait for, a customer to call back. Like customers get a voicemail, now they're worried and they don't have availability. And then you have a BDC agent who's trying to get you on a list to get serviced and they can't.
And I can imagine that can be a frustrating experience for that customer and probably equally as frustrating for the BDC trying to finally get the call. I would say so in that case, in the going through the Rolodex, what would you say was, or really how many customers would you say were realistically converted? You're making these calls, these 60, 70 calls a day. Realistically, how many of those were you actually getting out of that?
You're lucky to do like 2 or 3% of those, that conversion rate on outbound calls. A lot of people see a dealership, they're thinking you're selling them a car, so they're just ignoring the call or it's going to a voicemail. And then the customer does call you back, the agent's with somebody else. So it's one of those things where it just the call traffic, jams up, and then just getting them scheduled and trying to work them in between, normal repairs, customers that are trying to get maintenance.
I can definitely understand. Again, it sounds like, a pain on both sides for the customer thinking you're trying to sell some, the BDC rep just trying to get, their vehicle safe and on the road again. Yeah. So I was looking, and in your first month, we're pulling some numbers for you guys. Athens Ford, you were able to create 186 appointments across 7 campaigns. We were talking before the call, you've got 3 more on the way out the door today. But you got 186 appointments out of 7 campaigns, and that was targeting roughly, 1,250-ish vehicles. What changed for you operationally once this became a little bit more streamlined?
Allowed us to actually utilize our mobile service a lot more. Before it was a struggle just to get appointments for recalls, oil changes, and now that we have those customers communicated to and they can go on our online scheduler, which was the biggest thing. There was no way a customer could make a mobile service appointment. They would have to call into the dealership. And then now we have that link that gets sent out for the recall, and they can see other items that are on our scheduler that they can pick for oil changes and stuff like that. So it's making them more of aware of what we're offering on top of the recall. So like I said, it's a huge opportunity for us.
So now we're talking, going beyond just recall into not just, upsell potential, but also mobile, awareness, being aware that you are offering a mobile service and that they do have opportunities for others out there. Were you surprised by the response rates in the first, few campaigns there?
Oh yeah, like the first time we sent one out, that next morning, my BDC agents were like, there was 30 appointments set up on the scheduler, and they're like, who set them? Um, so we were literally like, they're like, how are we gonna get this handled? We're like, they're scheduled. They're already in the zones for the zip codes. They're already pre-aligned, and we just gotta, make the paperwork and get the technician out there. So it literally overnight we gained 30 appointments where it would take my BDC probably a week to try to generate 30 appointments.
I mean, that's fantastic. I think one of our biggest challenges is recall. We go out and we talk about it's free to our customer. We're not having to pay for it. We're just trying to get your vehicle safe and on the road. You mentioned something a second ago. I think it's really important to touch on that when they're going through the scheduler, they see other services. Are you guys seeing, many of those where you may see an extra service or two, that kind of incremental paid revenue on top of that recall?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like so the first couple of times we were like we would see just the recall, and then we started seeing like customers wanting to get oil changes done. Then there was cabin filters. So we're like, okay, this is great. So like for me as a the fixed operations director in the store, I'm like, okay, so now I can breathe easy because I've like say one of my BDC agents call in, I'm still able to connect with the customer, and the customer has an open schedule where they can go in and pick their appointment. Where I was relying on a BDC agent to make an outbound call, then to remember during that call to try to, ask them, hey, while we're out doing your free recall, did you want to go ahead and get your oil change done, your tires rotated, or, wiper blades replaced? Now it's the customer self-service, just like Amazon. They can go in, they can find what they want, they can put it in their cart, and they can check out. And we can just do what we do and get the cars fixed.
Did being able to send those campaigns make it a little easier on the technician planning and sort of predictability of the recall coming in? I know you were talking about like having to sort of scramble before, but did that make your operation a little bit more predictable, knowing when those campaigns were going out?
Yeah, so we could already schedule out like, hey, we just sent out one for reprogramming. So we know we have an escape that we can do for reprogramming. And all the vans have, internet access on it to do reprogramming too. And then basically we can kind of look at the workflow and go, hey, we just sent out a bunch of recalls for shifter bushings. So we can load up on the shifter bushings and then so forth with like, backup cameras. So there's a lot of different things that when we send out those recalls, we already have the supplies in the store to hold up the demand for the customer. So it wasn't like we were just sending out stuff we didn't have. Where a lot of another program we used would just send out to everybody, and
Mhm.
we wouldn't have parts. So that was the biggest deal. Now we can control what recalls we send out, and we can send them out in a mass quantity with the mass quantity of parts that we have available or reprogramming on each one of the vans.
And that's great. I think we get a lot of questions around what can we actually do on recalls on a mobile. We certainly hear the reprogramming, but hearing you talking about stocking shifter bushings and being able to go do backup cameras, I think there's a lot of opportunity on the table for mobile recall that's outside of even just that reprogramming. So if you were advising another fixed ops director, another service director, service manager, facing this sort of recall wave right now, what would you tell them?
I would say if you weren't on Spiffy or had some type of program that your customer could go in and select a time to get the recall done, and you're relying on a group of BDC agents to make outbound calls, you're really not allowing your business to grow. With being able to use Spiffy and use the recall upload link to be able to have those text messages go out to customers, it's a huge advantage in the market because we can hit more people at once than just relying on a couple agents to make outbound calls while they're trying to take inbound calls, and having your scheduler wide open, meaning not having certain times and dates blocked out, allowing your customer to make it convenient for them. Because once they do the recall and they see the convenience of it, that's when your opportunity is to be able to get the oil changes or their brakes or other maintenance services that vehicle needs. So making it more convenient for the customer is the biggest thing. Growing your business, you have to have something that's convenient for the customer to be able to do that. If you're having roadblocks and you're making it inconvenient for your customer to do business with you, they're going to do business with somebody else. So if I was a fixed operations director at another store or looking to get a product, this would be the product I would look at.
Helpful context from the ground level. It really is. I couldn't agree more that even if it's not spiffy, you got to have a way to be able to bring this revenue in and to be able to bring these recalls to your customers in a way that's predictable and that you can plan for. So appreciate all of that context. I think this is incredibly helpful, and I appreciate your time. We'll hand it back over to Ethan to talk about recall from a more broader strategic level and OEM perspective. Ethan, it's over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Addison. Thanks, Kyle. Great conversation there. David, welcome. How are you? Thanks for joining us, sir.
I'm great. It's great to be here. And I'll start by saying what I loved about what Kyle just said, and he covered the whole gamut of recall, is he never really talked about the revenue and the revenue associated. I mean, that was maybe a side part of the discussion. It was all about the customer and how do you better take care of the customer and how do we manage that customer relationship and ensure that we're in a position to do that. So Kyle, I give you credit for that. I think that's amazing, and that's exactly what an OEM would like and expect. So well done.
We'll start with the basics, David. How critical is recall completion from the OEM's perspective?
Well, it's imperative. Now, just to set the scale, there's two types of recalls. There's a safety recall, and then there's a customer satisfaction type of recall. So, customer satisfaction recall might be something that's not safety related. There's a lot of those that go on, but it's imperative that they get the safety recalls done. It could have a huge implication for the owner, the customer, and it could have a huge impact on the brand as well. And we've seen recalls that have had major catastrophic impacts of brands. And this is one that has to be addressed fairly quickly. The safety recalls, it's incredible how many of those are in market. Last year, there were 29 million safety recalls. Now, a safety recall for an OEM, they have full responsibility to contact the customer. They have full responsibility to pay for 100% of that repair, and they support that through their dealers. They ask their dealers to manage that because of the relationship with the dealers and the franchise system. So they can't do it themselves. They're dependent on the dealers, and they're dependent on supervisors like Kyle and managers like Kyle to help manage this relationship and this action with the customer. So it's a big number.
If there's one thing or a couple of things that OEMs kind of wish dealers better understood about executing on recalls when new ones come out, what would you say that list is?
Well, first and foremost, from an OEM perspective, it's all about taking care of their customer. How do we ensure the customer is out of harm's way? I just mentioned 29 million safety recalls last year. The industry in total has millions of recalls that are in place at any given time. There's 63 million vehicles on the road today that have a safety recall. Think about that. The industry sells 16 million a year. So it's like 4 years of annual sales are vehicles on the road that have a safety recall. It could be Takata, it could be anything associated with a specific brand. These are major, have major issues. A vehicle that comes back to a dealership as well can't be sold with a safety recall. That dealership has to do the repair, and it has to be at an approved dealership or a franchise dealer that does these repairs. So again, it's really important for the ecosystem for these to be done. There's a whole business that can be out there that can be cultivated just on managing the recall. You could take the shop capacity of Kyle, and if he was just focused on recall, he probably could fill his shop capacity 100% of the time just trying to tap into his fair share of the 63 million units that are out there. So there's a great need, and it's hard for the dealers to prioritize it because they have so much other service work that they're doing through their facility. That's why the mobile application is so invaluable for dealers to be able to leverage.
Appreciate you, demonstrating the scale of recall work that's out there, right? How does dealers' inability to go out and convert that work influence brand trust? Again, it's kind of at the OEM level in general.
If you're a customer and you get a letter in the mail and it says you have a safety recall, it's disconcerting. You want to get that addressed. You're concerned about yourself, your passengers, your family. And then it comes down to the convenience of the repair. And do you have time to do it? And a lot of people, it's a hard trade-off. If you're working full time, you don't have time to go into a dealership. You don't have 4 hours to set aside if that's what it takes to do it, and set that appointment and show up and wait for the repair to be done. A lot of customers, as I've said, 63 million outstanding safety recalls just don't get the work done. So again, it requires another avenue for dealers to be able to pursue. And that's what's exciting about the Spiffy solution. It allows dealers to leverage a mobile application to be able to go to people's homes, go to their place of work, and manage some of this recall work. And it creates a great opportunity for the OEM to really instill that greater relationship around safety and security for their customer as their dealers provide this service. And for the dealers, it provides an opportunity for them to extend their goodwill to their customer well beyond, because they can take care of customers that bought at their store or didn't buy in their store. If they're in their trade area, if they've come and serviced their vehicle, if they have the VIN, they can easily look up the VIN to see if there's a recall on it, and then they can go out and do the outreach for the customer to do that work. So dealers that go on the offense can really help expand their business opportunity and create goodwill with customers and bring those customers in at a later time to buy a new vehicle.
If you were advising, a franchise dealer today, how would you frame it to them? What they need to prioritize around this and why?
Well, if you look at the business, first off, you've got to prioritize this part of the business because it's all about relationship management and it's all about peace of mind for your customer. And if a customer comes in, or if they have an issue, or if the recall impacts their life in any way, shape, or form, you're going to lose that customer. The brand will lose the customer, and the dealer will lose the customer. It's interesting to note that 4 out of every 10 recalls, though, are software related. So these are actually easy fixes for dealers to be able to do. So they can do a lot of those remotely. And they don't need to have a $100,000 van to be able to do a software update for a customer. That's still an important recall for them to have. They can take one of their used vehicles on the lot. They can take another vehicle that they have in a service capacity to be able to support that. But they don't need this big operation, and they can hit multiple customers. The software updates to me are low-lying fruit. They're low-lying fruit for dealer engagement. They're low-lying fruit for dealers to get out and support their customers. And they're also low-lying fruit for people to do an analysis of a vehicle that's on the road that they can look at, and they can assess if there's any upsell opportunity with that customer. They might have low tires. They might need tire replacement. They might need brake replacement. They might have other issues of the vehicle that you can only assess when you're out there helping a customer and inspecting that vehicle. This gives them an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I love that positioning. There's plenty of software recall work out there. It's, pretty flexible in terms of the setting you can be in to address that. And if you can go out and visit the customer at their home or their place of work, it just gives you that extra touch point to identify additional work, right? You've touched on a lot of the hurdles to addressing recall work, I guess, but if you were really going to boil it down, what is the main reason or reasons that historically dealers just tend to underconvert on these recall opportunities?
Right. Well, it's resources and shop capacity. And that shouldn't be an excuse, especially now with mobile service. If you don't have the resources, you don't have the shop capacity, you can bring in people that understand light maintenance. So this isn't a diesel mechanic you're going to send out to do this type of work. You can get a light repair person to do it at lower cost. And then you can augment your shop capacity by creating another lane on the road with a vehicle. And that's obviously what Kyle has done. That's what a lot of other dealers are doing. I know Ford has a huge initiative. They have thousands of mobile service vans on the road. Other companies like Hyundai are creating an initiative, and they're bringing that across their entire dealer body across the country. So brands are starting to embrace this, and it gives them the added capacity that they need for this type of light repair that creates a great deal of customer sat, loyalty, and retention for the brand and for the specific dealer. So it's truly an opportunity to differentiate your brand as a dealer or your brand as a company, as an OEM in the marketplace. And companies are starting to embrace this more and more than I've ever seen before.
Great. Well, let's close with, I guess, the broader question, which is ultimately, how do you see this trend, mobile digital service offering? How do you kind of see recalls fitting into that strategy in general moving forward, over the next several years?
I think it's going to be explosive growth, and it's going to be enabled through mobile capacity. Again, it's difficult, especially for us, if it's just a software flash or software repair, to give up a lane in your service department to do that. There's a great opportunity to leverage mobile. And I go back because I think there's a great misconception in the industry about mobile service that I've got to spend $100,000 on this big van and I've got to equip it for all kinds of utilization. I don't have to do that for recall work. I can take a used Escape, or I can take a new Escape. I can take an Explorer. I can take a Jeep. I can take a smaller vehicle that I might have in service. I can be able to go and put that application in market and take care of my customers. I can do software flashes on the road. I can do oil changes. I can do tire rotations. I can do a lot of things without spending $100,000 on a van. So if I take a $20,000 vehicle that's used, that's sitting on my lot, I convert that, I put one of our oil change facilities or one of the oil change products that somebody like Spiffy has, or I can do some of the tire measurement tools. I can do a lot of work remotely through a small apparatus that is very low cost. And then I can reap the benefits of that. And again, the benefits are so many different ways. It's the OEM paid service that's going to happen. It's the upsell opportunity. And I think it's most importantly, the long-term relationship to the customer and selling that customer the next vehicle down the road. That's the benefit.
Yep. Yeah, I think dealers get, if you go and take that six-figure investment into a larger van, your main concern is utilization, right? And you want to have that breadth of services on the van in order to make sure that you're getting an ROI on that investment. And to your point, the beauty of some of these opportunities with the sedans or crossover SUVs, where you could kind of upfit them for recall specific work. Obviously, there's the revenue opportunity, but there's also the customer satisfaction piece, the OEM satisfaction piece, for lack of a better way to say it, and then obviously freeing up your bays to do that higher ticket work. But thank you, David, so much for that awesome insight from the OEM level. Appreciate it. I want to go ahead and wrap up today. Thank you to both of our panelists for an awesome conversation. Close just by addressing a few themes that stood out. So first, recall is not just about compliance. It's an opportunity to re-engage your customers, including those who may have already left the dealership for the independence for most of their service needs. Second, execution determines whether recalls translate to a meaningful bump in revenue and increased retention rates, or become more of an administrative nightmare for your various teams at the dealership. And finally, you need the infrastructure in place to drive success. We find that dealers who build systems outperform dealers who scram. Ford's recent recall announcement affecting over 4 million vehicles, as we know, is not going to be the last large-scale event that the industry sees. The question is whether it becomes a burden or a strategic advantage.
What we consistently see, and I think has been echoed, by Kyle today, is when recall outreach becomes structured, appointment flow becomes predictable. Your BDC strain decreases. Service departments operate with more efficiency and more clarity, and it becomes the difference between backlog and booked appointments, capturing that customer satisfaction.
So if this discussion helped identify any gaps in your recall outreach, scheduling, or ability to convert, we'd welcome a conversation. You can learn more about recall capture and what implementation looks like at the link provided below. Again, I just want to say thank you to Kyle and David, and to you, Addison, for your insights, and thank you to everyone for joining us.